Well, I expect most of you in this room started your endurance career in the 21st century. If so, my talk tonight is history. However, for the rest of you, I hope it will bring back some happy memories. How did EGB come into existence? It's very, very new. So, endurance began worldwide only in the 1950s. And then it gradually spread from the United States. And it reached England, and it was England and Wales, in the early 70s, the Endurance Horse and Pony Society of Great Britain. And I read an article in a newspaper about the Golden Horseshoe. And I thought, gosh, that sounds exciting. 100 miles, 2 days, Exmoor. I hadn't at that stage ridden for 17 years. But I thought, I'm going to start riding again. And I did. And I bought a horse. And my very first ride was in Wales at the Red Dragon, doing a 25-mile CTR on a horse I had not seen until the day before, which I was hoping to buy. And I bought it. And the saddle and bridle. And the trailer. And my elder son has never been told that the money I had tucked away I was going to give to him after he left university, that he was such a pain as a teenager, I bought a horse instead. What happened? I hadn't touched anything. Oh, I should have. So I found, I lived in County Durham then. I didn't know anybody in the horse world, so I had no one to ask. I'd only lived in County Durham since the 60s. So I joined the two societies. I joined the EHPS, no Google or anything like that to help me. I don't know how oh yes, the lady I bought the horse from told me. You must join BHS Long Distance Riding Group. So I did, and then I heard about EHPS, joined that as well. To me, it seemed a bit odd to have two societies, but that was the thing to do. And more choice of rides. Well, actually, no choice of rides. No rides at all in Durham, Northumberland, or Cumbria. So, my first ride, I had to go all the way down to North Yorkshire. West Yorkshire, actually, was the very first one. EHPS one. North Yorkshire, very first long distance riding group one. So I thought, well, this is ridiculous. I've got to be able to do it in County Durham and Northumberland. So I thought, okay, I'll organise a ride. Bear in mind, I'd been to one ride. But I have to admit, I had been involved in the sport of orienteering, and I had organised major competitions and been a senior official. So I wasn't fazed by the idea of working out a route in an area I'd never been to before, finding the people and putting it on and marking it. So I organised this ride from a friend's house in Upper Weardale, and a few people came, including Leslie over there, and after the ride we said, well, there's a group in West Yorkshire, we need a group up here. So the Northumberland and Durham group was formed. Leslie, Heather Park, if some of you will know her from Cumbria, and myself, and one or two others. And our committee meetings were held in a pub, and they were just a chat around the table.
Nothing changes then.
I do? That's right. But as I said, I also joined the BHS at that time was the governing body of all equestrian sports, except show jumping. BSJA already existed. But eventing, dressage, all came under BHS. Anyway, there was a movement for autonomy, I think that's what it's called, run your own organisation, and they all split from the BHS. That actually didn't happen until 1997. I know we changed from long distance riding group to ERG, endurance riding group, because we felt that people got rather a wrong idea that all we did was just trick, trot all the time, looking like dressage riders, except we did it for rather a long time. So they changed it to endurance riding group. And then we had the split from the BHS, and we became BERA. And we thought again, well, we need a group. So we set up a group. And at this time, I knew lots more people, and knew quite a lot of people just over the border, all those people who are now served borders. And so we set up a cross-border group. And the EHPS group, N&D, thrived, and so did the cross-border group. And then, in addition, the early days of CIRC were taking place in Inverness, Highland Long Distance Riding Group. And a few years after I had done my first few rides, I thought, I'd love to do one in Scotland. I want to see just how difficult an endurance ride can be. We had Upper Weardale, and we'd had Ullswater, and I thought, it's got to be something harder than Ullswater. So I knew of Candy Cameron, so I was up there for a 5-day orienteering event. And I thought, I know, I'll ride at Candy's on the rest day in the middle. So I did, and I found out that it was an endurance ride on the last day of the week. So I asked Candy if I could ride one of her horses, and she said yes. So I did my first Scottish ride, and I met Carol and Rex Bunting and Kate McIver and a few other of the Inverness crowd who are still close friends of mine today. It just shows you, endurance riding creates friends. And then, very difficult situation began to arise with BERA and EHPS, and there was a bit of a them and us situation. Wasn't nice. Anyway, come on, it should be going down. I'll go down to the bottom. Oh no, it doesn't want to go any further. Well, I want to go to the next page. Oh, there we go. So, EGB was formed, and the rest is history, which you are part of. So now I'm going back to the beginning again. I'm going to rush through this bit because it's the boring bit. But you may think the rules are complicated. Imagine what it's like with 2 sets of rules. And these are the rules. I'm not going to read them, you can look at them. So this is BHS, Long Distance Riding Group, and BERA, who had the same rules. Direct succession, bronze buckle, silver stirrup, gold series. And one thing about, sorry to speak to you from the floor, one thing about this is that BERA was in charge of international. They selected the team and they managed the team. Remember that in a moment. EHPS, competitive trail rides. So you can see that aspect of the EHPS went on into EGB. One thing that's different is that the heart rates, instead of just the final heart rate, it was the difference between your starting heart rate and your final heart rate gave you penalties. And they affected your grading. For the first few years, respiration rate was taken as well. That, thankfully, was stopped. You can see that both of them held major championships, Cirencester and the Solstice. And the Highland Long Distance Riding Group was working in thistles, as they still do, as CIRC. Now, this is where things Remember, we were a group of less than 10 people. But we were keen and determined, and we were prepared to travel the north. Upper Weardale was the first ride. These dates are the date that ride first took place. 84, Upper Weardale. 85, Ullswater, still running today. I worked out that route, organised it for 5 years, handed it over to Anne Aldridge, who recently has handed it over to other people. Blanchland, that was Leslie's baby. And she took great risks, because there was a very ferocious gamekeeper who has now gone, I can reassure you. And he did not like the idea of stakes going out on his grouse moor. And one day he had the temerity to take Leslie on and say, "You can't have those here, we're going to remove them." And Leslie said, "Those are flags, bamboo canes and a piece of plastic from a feed sack. Those are my property. If you touch them, I'm going to report you to the police." And remember the difference in size between Leslie and the gamekeeper? Anyway, we had a fabulous ride the next day. Hampsterley. I don't know if any of you have been onto the moors beyond Hampsterley, not the ones that we've used the last few years, but more towards Eggleston. Some really good bogs out there. Hexham, the first time, Hexham 87. Oh dear. Hexham 87, that was, we'd already had this sneaky idea. I'd been down to the solstice in Sherwood Forest as a spectator. I thought, gosh, this is exciting. Starting at 3:30 in the morning, and all these horses galloping round. We can do better than that because we've got moorland. So I got everybody to our house, and I said, I've got an idea to put to you. How about our group organising the solstice? And amazingly, before they left, they all agreed. And but we were sensible. We said, we've got to give it a try first. So, without saying to anybody at National, we organised a ride from Hexham Racecourse. And with just a 50-mile race ride, with the finishing straight along the road, which was a bit alarming and turning it sharp into the gateway, but they survived. And it really was a racing finish, wasn't it, Leslie? Anyway, we took photographs and we wrote out our case and we sent it to headquarters, and they said, "Oh, thank you very much." I don't think a group had ever offered to do anything before of that level. I hasten to add, Di Sanderson, who some of you will know as the TS for nearly all our rides. Why do you think she comes up here 2 or 3 times a year for years and years? It's because this is where she started. Anyway, there you are. I'm not going to go through them all. All those rides took place, some of them maybe only for 2 or 3 years, some for 5, 10, 15, 20, and Ullswater over 25 years. And then you can see we divided into the cross-border group, covered a larger area, and we went over the border into the Lammermuir Hills, where I rode only this summer with Rachel in a circ ride, and I was riding in places that we had had for that ride in '95, and I recognised them. Annick was fantastic in the days when the Duke was generous enough to let us into Hume Park without charging us. Sadly, we had to move away once he did. The border ride, well, that was an exciting time. I'll leave that a little bit because I've lots of stories to tell about that. Greystoke in Cumbria and Calais. So, there we are. In addition to all those competitive rides, we just ran a few pleasure and training rides. Oh, I've gone too far. No, it doesn't want. Anyway, the first one, Simon Bone. Yes, I was teaching at that time in Newcastle, and there was a boy in my class who lived out near Wark, Wark as in Janet's Wark, and his parents hunted, and this boy said, "Oh, I'm sure my mum can plan a course for you," and she did. But it included crossing the Wark's Burn. I don't know if any of you know the river there. Anyway, as always, it poured with rain the day before. Most of us were able to get across, but Leslie rode a little horse and she swam across. Correct? Glen Mellor was a ride that Leslie planned, and we all enjoyed it very much. Not much fun for her, though. At the end of the ride, an irate landowner came, "Why are you riding across my land?" And another landowner had given her permission to ride across the other chap's land. So we didn't go there again. We went quite far, Great Ayton. I remember going up over Rosebery Topping in the snow. Barningham, fabulous, just on the Durham-Yorkshire border. That's good wild country. Alwynton, the route was much longer than yours, Paul, and I've got the map. I'll show it to you. If anybody feels like organising a 20-mile or a 17-mile, it was done in 1988, so it can be done again. Okay, so now we're going on a bit. Now, I'm just talking about 1980s. And I went through all the results that I have in my files, and I could only find 5 people who are still around who were riding in the 1980s. There were a few more in the 1990s, but I just stuck with those few. Heather in Cumbria, Sue Russell from Durham, Di Sanderson now in York. Then the top endurance horses, riders, i.e. my heroes, the people I wanted to be like. Pauline Holloway. Not many of you may know her. She lives in Nottinghamshire. She has daughters who compete. She has granddaughters to compete. And she now finds herself babysitting great-granddaughters at rides. I met her on my very first ride in 1983, and she was very friendly and helpful, and I took to ringing her when I had a problem. She taught me everything I knew in my first 5 years, and we still talk to each other at least once a month. Another example of the benefits of endurance riding. Pam James, some of you will know as a current selector. Candy Cameron, one of the top riders from Scotland, from Inverness. Val Long now lives up in that area. Her horse Tarim was one of the very, very best, a black Arab stallion. Jill Thomas from Cornwall, you occasionally see word of her, and Liz Finney from Cheshire. She's an FEI official. She, poor thing, was in charge of the World Championships at Euston Park. Now, how about that? We won Team Gold in 1990. And Jane Donovan on Ivories won the individual silver. Pauline Holloway and Chris and Pam James were in the team in Rome. So I happened to sit opposite over a cup of tea someone who had been in the gold medal team at my very first ride. No wonder I was inspired. But nowadays, solstice doesn't get a lot of publicity, but it used to be fantastic. Golden Horseshoe and Solstice were the rides that everybody dreamed of taking part in. And if you hadn't got a horse that could do 100 miles, you'd go and help or spectate. The very first time I watched this was down in Sherwood Forest. Drove down, put the tent up in the pouring rain, set the alarm for 2:45 in the morning, so I could watch the horses trot up under floodlights at 3 o'clock for the start at 3:30. It was electric. It was fantastic. And then we got back into our sleeping bags. Left riders to set off, had breakfast, and went out and watched their first vet gate and came back thinking, I'm going to do 100 miles one day. Anyway, long before I did 100 miles, I helped organise 100 miles. And this was such fun and such hard work. Di, Leslie and I were absolute wrecks at the end of this ride. We took a year planning this because we had run the trial run the year before. This was bigger and better. Well, first of all, we doubled the length of the route. And I have to admit, I used the boys I was teaching to help me a bit, because besides teaching geography and biology, I had the orienteering group, and so I used to take them out for runs. We'd drive out to Slaley Forest, I'd give them a map, and I'd draw a line on the map, and this was to take them along bridleways I'd never been on, and I said, you run from A to B, and I'll drive round and go from B to A, and I'll meet you. And in this way, I got quick information as to which bridleways were fit. They didn't know they were doing this for a horse competition. They were doing this as fitness training. And there was one unfortunate time when all the snow had gone from Newcastle. We just got out to Slaley. I dropped them off at Blanchland, went round to Slaley. The gate at the top of Carrier's Way, which some of you will know, was this high in snow, so they weren't that pleased. Never mind. So you may think, how on earth did a group of about half a dozen people put on a ride of this size? Well, we spent a lot of time on it. We involved a lot of other people, and we worked very hard. I have still got my file, and I looked at it the other night, and I counted up all the names. We had 40 route and gate marshals, and in addition, 4 scout groups. And again, I let my sixth form orienteers in on this, and one boy who said his dad had a small tent that he could borrow, because I wanted someone at Stob Cross. Some of you will know Stob Cross, right in the middle of Hexhamshire Common, because at that point, as you know, the routes go off in 4 directions. And I didn't rely on the riders doing the right thing, because the maps were only black and white photocopies. You know, they weren't printed, they weren't colour, they were all hand-drawn, mostly manuals, safely, and I needed somebody there, and they needed to be there for the first loop. So obviously they had to be there the night before. So this small boy, he was a small sixth former, spent the night on his own in the tent at Stob Cross. You wouldn't be allowed to do that now. He's probably telling this story at his 50th birthday party or something. Anyway, we had 6 vets and 4 farriers. You get some idea of the size of it. We had sponsorship. The fact that my favourite drink is red martini has nothing to do with the fact that we had sponsorship from them. One of the top EHPS people worked for them, and he got it. We had a commentator. I raked in a friend who was Brendan Foster's colleague at Gateshead Stadium in the early days, and John offered to do it for me. It also was the final selection ride for the British team, so we had all the top riders. Jill Thomas came all the way from Cornwall to Northumberland, and Candy from Inverness, and so on and so forth. The start was at 3:30, as it always was, and I can remember my job on the day was being on the first gate, away onto Greenridge Fell. And so I got along there in the dark, parked my car, sat on the gate, and watched the time, and counted down to 3:30, so I knew they'd started about 1.5 miles away, and I just waited and waited, and then I could hear click, 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 as all these horses trot along the road, and then they'd go quiet again because there were trees, then they'd start trotting, I'd hear the sound, and then they came round the corner. I had the gate wide open, I was sitting on it, the dawn was breaking, and all these horses came pouring through, past me at the fast trot, onto the grass, and they cantered across Greenridge Fell over to Catton. It was magic. It really was. Later on I'm going to show you a picture of the first cruise spot. But all day it became hotter and hotter, and people were complaining about the heat of Northumberland. But, as so often happens at the end of a really hot day, a mist came down. However, we knew that mists are not that unusual in summer in Northumberland, I had taken the precaution of getting a team of my friends who were expert orienteers, given them a map. They all were perfectly capable of running blind, so to speak, i.e. without being able to see a marker. And I had them all lined up to go to Catton if a mist came down, and the last few riders were guided across, because you couldn't see the markers, because you couldn't see to the end of this room, probably see half the distance, and the markers were much wide apart from that, and they led them across. Interestingly, I'll leave that out. So there is a picture. Now, except for Paul, who I've already told where it is, who's the first person who can tell me where that is?
Rawleyburn. The Ford at Rawleyburn?
Yeah, that's right. Oh, it says so, for heaven's sake.
Yes.
Anyway, some of you will know that UCR that goes up, and that's Rowley Ford, and that was a good crew point, and I had got round all the way around Whitley Chapel and there, and I took that photograph at 5 in the morning, and I never took another photograph that day. I was far too busy. So sad. And the eventual winner is the horse on the right, Sal Long on Taran. I've got many, many more stories, but I promised Paul. And my horses of the early years. Galley, a grey mare. Spirit, another grey mare, pictured there with Leslie on Salon, for all the wonderful adventures we had together. And I've never told you about the border ride. Have I got a few minutes? Gosh, which one, Leslie, first? The border ride was an 80-mile unrepeated loop race ride, starting at Tow Ford on the Scottish side, crossing the border several times, The winter before, I walked every bridleway in the Cheviots to see what the choice was. Got help from National Park as to who to contact, found a venue at Yetham, etc., etc. Then, of course, we had to ride it. So we started at Easter. And Leslie and I, riding up the street, that some of you will know, the old Roman road from Hoonham, moor burning in March. Heather was all crackling away. It was coming across, and we wanted to get up here. And I said, Leslie, what do we do? Do we turn back? No, we can't turn back. We've got to do this bit today. She very bravely went in front. Well, her horse was very brave. And we cantered up this track with these flames coming up on our right. So that was one little adventure. Another, a few weeks later, we were on one of the highest points above Attenburn. Colin will know these places, if the rest of you don't. It really is very high, and it's a ridge. And there was a gale, and I had walked it, so I knew where I was going, and there was a path. But I was beginning to think this was really getting a little bit dangerous. And eventually I turned around. Of course, Leslie couldn't hear anything I said, and nor could I hear anything she said because of the wind. But I eventually pulled the spirit up, turned around and said, I think we're going to have to turn round. And she said, I thought you were never going to say that. And then, poor Leslie, I said, well, if we can't do this bit, we could do another bit lower down near Halterburn. So we went down there. Poor Ray was sitting in, waiting for us somewhere. Anyway, I don't know if it was the same day, it doesn't matter. But from Halterburn to Troutburn, from the Halterburn Valley over to Troutburn, which is in England, so another crossing of the border, was the most fabulous ledge path, with a great drop on the right-hand side. It's lovely, I mean, an old cart track. Footpath, of course. And we're walking along this, spirit going very happily, me just loving riding. Little voice said, I don't like heights. So we turned around. Anyway, we had lots and lots of, oh yes, finish. I'm afraid again over the Scottish side. Leslie and I, this was not a test riding, this was actually in a low-key circ competition near Yetham. And we were going up the hill through Vention Farm, again, which was used for the championships this year, so some of you may have done it. And I was in front, and there was this great big black bull. And over the years, because I've worked out in the wilds on foot as well as on a horse a lot, and I've become very casual about bulls. But this bull, if he could have talked, would have said, I'm sick of you horse riders, and I'm not having you two through here. And he stood and barred the way. And I hesitated. And then he started pawing, and then he started shaking his head, at which point I said to Leslie, quick! And we turned on our heels. We left the marked route, mind you, and we went straight up the hillside. Now, bear in mind, we didn't know how long this hillside was, or where the next gate would be. But our two horses, this was early in the season, and they just were thrilled to have a chance to gallop in April, and they went flat out. And at the top, there was a gate. And you never saw two middle-aged ladies get through a gate so quickly in your life. So we got through, and we took a deep breath. We looked back, no sign of the bull. And so we've lived to tell the tale.
Sue, thank you. I know when it was suggested to the committee that Sue would be an ideal person to talk tonight. When I rang her up, she said, yes, I'll do it, but how much can I leave out, not how much can I put in. It's interesting to see the speeds, 7 to 8, really quite slow compared to what we do today.
Yes, but we had no gate marshals. We did, and we were very aware that we were much slower, 7 to 8 miles per hour. But we realised we did every gate ourselves, so we were getting off up to 25. Well,
Yes.
more than once a mile.
Can you imagine?
And when Spirit and I got selected for the intermediate team, and we had to go down to the Sherwood Forest to do a training ride, and the person in charge said, I want you all to ride between 10 and 12 miles per hour. So that's 16 kph and 18, 19 kph. And my face must have dropped. I had never gone faster than 8.5. And she said, Sue, have you got a problem? I said, no. And I rode with Jane Edwards, and I remember, of course, no gates, all canterable, no roads. And we had been told that one thing you must never do is go faster than the speed they've told you. And someone was crewing and said, Sue, you're going over 12 miles per hour. So that just showed you. And yet I was going at the speed that I always went.
Yes.
It was just the difference of the terrain. So if you can do 12 kph, 12 to 14 kph in Hexham, in Sherwood Forest, you can do 16.
So easy.
Mind you, now of course we have gate marshals. It's lovely.
It's interesting how small the world it becomes. When I first started coming up to the North East on holiday in the 80s, occasionally with Northumberland Horse Holidays, I'd be out on the moors on a Monday morning and there'd be these funny flags stuck all over them. And I must admit, it's a good job you didn't start a trend of people camping at Stubbs Cross. So many times I've had riders go through there who couldn't stop at the cross. They've been told to. If they were camping there would have been chaos. Sue, thank you very much.